So my name is Adnan Shahid. I work for RHI Magnesita as the Vice President and in charge for planning and procurement of our resale products. My job essentially is to look after the production planning, the inventory planning, and statistical forecasting of all our finished goods. And RHI Magnesita at this point is going through a tremendous amount of development, growth. We are almost a 4 billion euro company, focused mostly on providing refractory products and services to steel plants, cement plants, glass plants, and that industry. Actually, the saying is that you cannot function without refractory. And one of my old bosses actually used to say refractory is one of the oldest invention for humans. And the answer is correct, because whenever you needed fire, you also needed, stone to actually, control that fire, to sustain that fire, to keep it warm and everything. Refractory is essentially the product which is the essential component in producing steel, glass, cement. It is the lining inside the high temperature zones. It is what provides the facility for steel production. A very famous tagline from our company is, "Can you stand the heat?" which is basically for us something to be proud of, because we produce products that can actually sustain everything beyond 1200 degrees and even up to 1700 degrees. And that's quite phenomenal. It started with the whole experience around COVID, when we realized how difficult it was for us to, reposition ourselves after what was happening in the supply chain world. We realized that a lot of our data sets were compartmentalized. A lot of operations that we did between our planning teams was in silos. They were talking different numbers, different versions of the truth. And that's when we already knew this, but we just realized that we need to do something about this going forward. But also, that time was not the best to actually jump into something like this. You need to first stabilize your supply chain, your operations, and everything. So that's what we invested in. But then we went like, okay, we need to now step outside and look for a long-term solution with an advanced planning solution and try to bring that in and stabilize our operations. Yeah, we call it Everest because, like the mountain itself, it's not an easy climb. So going from Excel-based, everybody's own version of truth, to a combined planning solution where everybody's looking at the same number, yeah, this is quite a climb. This is quite a mission. So that's where it started. But we also felt that it's quite a steep climb, because you cannot take 10 years to do this. You have to get this done in a certain amount of time with a certain amount of efficiency and with the right resources and the right investment. So it had to be planned like the climb of a mountain, like the Everest climb. And that's where we moved around with a few names, but eventually we stuck with this, and it reflected very nicely what we were trying to do. I think the answer over there is that this is not something that happens 1 week, 2 weeks, 2 months. Actually, the terms are that the destination is the journey. So you basically continuously, on the change path. For us, what has been very, very difficult is that because we were trying to do this in a period when supply chains were already, sort of still recovering from the bullwhip of COVID and everything. The software '09 itself was, sort of newer in the market. And at the same time, we were also dealing with, let's say, conditions around the business which were not stable, right? So that's the tremendous amount of change that we had to bring in. Then we had to explain how this process, which is very different from Excel-based, individually owned processes, to a combined, planning solution that had to stick. So we had to do a lot of stakeholder management. We had to explain the project, explain the logic behind, why advanced planning solutions are needed, why '09 is needed. And we spent a lot of time over there. We spent a lot of energy over there. But at the same time, we also, I think we are still in that journey. We are still spending that time with the sales guys, with the, let's say, the commercial teams in the regions and everything, trying to still explain. But then you always have pockets of good change, pockets of slow change, right? So you jump on the good change, and then, the change agents that are supporting this. So that's what we've been trying to emphasize upon. And working with the others to actually keep moving them towards positive change agents. The thing is that I'm also lucky to work for RHI Magnesita at a time and as an organization which is very interested in digital transformations. So this is not just about changing, let's say, going from paper-based entry to actually, now we have an online entry system, and that's not what we're talking about. So we really are talking about transformation here. '09, or the Everest journey for our company, came first because we needed that, because that was identified as a weakness for us, and we had the capability to actually see it and then deliver it. So that's how we started. Of course, that required a complete change on the data platform. So we had to rejig how we look at our ERPs and then prepare them for '09. S4 HANA is the journey that all organizations who use SAP have to go through. We decided to start it already. That does not mean that it's the best time or the worst time or whatever, but the point is that's how we've decided to do it. What it allows us to do is that we are doing '09 now in a certain region. And then when we have set that transformation up, we will now follow that up with S4HANA transformation over there. So what we are constantly trying to do is to keep an eye open, not to set up any data platforms which are not suitable for what comes behind that. And that's the best part of doing these transformations together. Well, if you were there in those conversations, you would see that we were, pretty impressed with what '09 was actually offering. We were looking for a solution which was actually giving us the complete portfolio of activities that we wanted to do. So we were not looking for somebody who's very good in demand planning or very good in, let's say, operations planning or factory planning, because for those we already had tools. So we were already doing PPDS with SAP. We were doing, a nice demand planning software. But essentially, we were looking for a tool which could combine all of this and actually make us, successful across the spectrum. One of the key things that we were also looking for was the order promising part. So now this is starting from demand planning, starting from where you receive, let's say, the forecast from your sales guys, all the way through the factory with production planning, production allocation, inventory planning, and then confirming the order to the customer. This was the full scope that we were looking at, and that's where we felt '09 was a very strong platform. North America for us is a very important part of the business in terms of revenue and everything. It's, let's say, there are other parts of the business who are comparable, but from a pure cash generation and also profit generation perspective, it's a very important part of the business. It also is a smaller production footprint for us, so it allowed us to focus on, let's say, fixing the demand planning aspect, the order promising aspect first, and not complicate matters too much on the supply planning aspect. So it had some pros from that perspective. Internally, we identified this as the biggest point of working capital for us because we wanted to improve the working capital situation in that part of our business. So that was also one of the reasons why we started with that. The simple truth of the matter is that, let's say, from a change perspective, this was also felt that there's a region that this will adopt faster. So that's also one of the things why we went with North America first. In simple terms, we want our sales teams to focus on their markets, on their customers, on selling as much as they can, on driving value from their aspect. We don't want them to be worried about, let's say, the supply challenges or the planning challenges that we have internally. So allowing them to focus on an unconstrained demand and filling in or giving in their recommendations per customer, per SKU, from that perspective was something we wanted to explore, because especially through COVID and the recent supply chain challenges, a lot of this conversation had now become constrained because people were already like, oh yeah, but we can't do this because this connection doesn't work, or we can't do this because we don't have inventory over here. Yeah, but that's what we wanted to change. So we allow, by doing this deployment on demand planning for '09, we allowed them to focus on their markets, on their customers, and serving their customers, driving value over there, and leaving the internal challenges for the planning team and for the tool to resolve. I think I can share a lot of examples, but one of the best examples that we see is the number of touch points. So every time the order actually comes through the organization, we did this test before we actually went for any planning solution. We actually analyze, how many times the order is actually touched within the organization. I mean, it was like even after the order is accepted by the customer, it was something like 40 times that the order was actually touched, which is like either somebody was, replanning the activity, or somebody was, changing the date, or changing the delivery conditions, or changing the logistic conditions. Something was happening to the order. And that is what we think and what we are trying to now prove through the deployment in North America pilot, that we will be able to reduce this significantly. I'm really talking about 90% less interactions. And by doing this, this will tremendously release efficiency in the organization, allow us to focus our energies on more productive efforts rather than just correcting the same order, which we've been doing in the past. The thing is that when we started with O9, and this is part of the journey that we didn't even realize ourselves, and when we started writing down the processes involved, and so level 1, level 2, level 3, we actually discovered how much waste existed in our organization. Now that is a realization that was not even there when we actually made the business case for O9. And this is one of the things that we have been able to successfully demonstrate, the amount of waste that we've been able to take out by actually deploying O9 in the North America region, that why we are able to actually move through faster in our processes. This is a realization that we feel will continue further. I know that we also made a business case for actually delivering inventory reduction. This will come naturally. We think we will be achieving on the side of something like 80 million euros inventory reduction in our footprint because of deploying a planning solution. But I'm personally more interested and actually happier with the amount of waste that we are taking out from our processes because of this deployment. Some of the things that I feel that people don't talk about enough is that this is not a linear journey. So it doesn't work that you start day one and you go like everything is going to be perfect and everything is going to be smooth sailing from here. There was a lot of, let's say, resistance that we had to face in the beginning of the journey, that we had to explain to people why we were doing what we were doing. We also had to, explain to people that this is not about getting rid of their jobs and stuff like this. So this was also a realization that had to be, sort of explained again and again. I think the lessons that I would like to share with the others is that please do not expect it to be a linear journey. Please do not expect that your data maps are going to be, a simple exercise of connecting them to whatever O9 or whatever table that O9 requires. Please also do not expect that when you go to a region, that region is exactly the same as what the previous region was, or that because you've deployed it in one, then the other one will be smooth sailing. All of these things actually tell us how important this journey was and still is, and why we need to do this more than ever. But it is not a linear curve. It is not a straight journey. So you will, and just like climbing a mountain, you will go up and down and then up eventually. I think over here, this was something we really identified as a very key element right from the beginning of the journey. So we identified as something what we called an MVP, so minimum viable product, right? In my case, it was like most valuable player because that's how I looked at it. Because if you're not able to deliver something for the organization which is interesting enough, quickly enough, people start losing interest in this thing. This is what we defined. So we defined a set of criteria and a set of KPIs already from the beginning, that we want to look at these things within the first 6 months. We want to have this up and running. We want to have a view of the tool with our data, with our numbers inside it, even if it's not programmed, not automated yet, but it's carrying our numbers. So we did that. We had our demand plan and our production plan showing inside O9 within the first 6 months. And that allows for the rest of the organization to see, so there is some relevance here. So it's not a journey where, there are people at the back end programming this for the next year and a half, and then we will see one big bang and everything will be fine. So it's about creating that, sort of interest throughout the journey. It took us a few months to set that up, but I think this was a very important step to keep the interest of the organization. I think as far as a company goes, again, like I said, RHI Magnesita itself is very interested in these kind of solutions. So we feel that we want to explore these possibilities. We are still in the process of writing those, let's say, those use cases where we could actually, work on some of these AI solutions in planning. In other parts of the organization, we are already doing some experiments, but we could do more. The thing is that it's also, you have to go from learning to crawl to walk to run. We are not in that phase yet where we could actually say, let's go to demand sensing, right? We have to first get ourselves into that zone where we are consistently having a reliable input and output in O9 demand planning, then develop the next stage of AI and machine learning on that same set of data to actually determine, your demand plan even faster or smarter than what we are doing. But it's definitely part of our journey. It's definitely what we are going to go after. We will need those tools. That's something we are exploring. And yeah, we are looking for, all kinds of help from O9 on this. The biggest part that we felt in the beginning of the conversation was that, oh, we are not ready for this. Maybe we should recheck our numbers. Maybe we should, recheck, the market and everything. Actually, the part that I've learned through this experience is, yeah, you need to get in. You just need to step into this. You need to face this, because only then you will realize how bad it really is. Because without knowing, without actually exploring your own processes and, sitting with smart people and actually going through breaking down your components, you will not realize, what you're leaving on the table. So that's the first thing I would encourage, that people should just get into it. It doesn't mean that, you should install the advanced planning solution tomorrow, but get into the habit of actually exploring digital solutions, exploring all kinds of automated solutions. That's one. The second part is, take care of your team, because this is not a journey where you can, power through because you have a great manager and a great leader. Yes, we will do all this. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. You really need very good, strong people who are resilient, who are not, I mean, this is a term that is coming around a lot, anti-fragile. And so you need people who are able to take hits and then still get up and still keep moving. This is the mantra that we are trying to, sort of sell to our teams as well, that yeah, it's okay, this one didn't work, let's try again and let's keep moving forward, because this is, like I said, a journey. And if you have a good team, you're a good set of people with you, you will be able to get through this.